going to be doing support group in about 20 minutes, and I thought I would do a quick reminder. And for anyone who's interested in the Brain Lock Challenge, I'll read some of my highlights from this week's reading. And it starts off with hope and then faith. And then there's some really funny stories in this chapter of brain lock, just of people before treatment and after. It's funny. I mean, it's terrifying and sad on the one hand, but they get better after. So here are some of my highlights from brain lock. OCD is the first psychiatric condition in which a successful psychotherapeutic intervention that actually changes the brain function has been documented. So when people with OCD do compulsive behaviors in a vain effort to buy a little piece, they're just really exacerbating brain lock. So you can systematically change your responses to OCD thoughts and urges, and there will be a different change in the value and the meaning you place on what you feel. So this is really good to keep in mind. It'll keep you motivated to keep going when things get tough, and things are often very tough. And so that's the hope. The treatment works according to Brain Lock, which is great because it's one of the main books on OCD. And then the next mini chapter for this week was keeping the faith. And he says, what you should pray for is not that symptoms will go away. He says you should pray for the strength to fight off OCD. And there's a tendency to become demoralized and hate yourself because you'll feel guilt and inadequate. But one of the profound rewards of successful therapy from a spiritual perspective is that you learn to forgive yourself from having the terrible thoughts and the symptoms, and that it's not it's not your spirit or anything with you. It's a medical disease. So. And he goes on with faith, saying you need a tremendous sense of faith in your capacity to resist the urges. I mean, it's hard, checking is such an easy compulsion to give into. And then it's so easy to just think there's something wrong with you because the urges are they're so visceral. You can kind of like picture yourself wanting it. You feel you want it. So I really liked it when I read this. It has everything to do with medical disease, not not like an evil spirit. And he talks about how you have to have the faith to direct your mind, to stay away from the symptoms and remove yourself from the site that triggers it. So if it's the sink, it's to get away from the sink when you feel pulled to check and check and check. And then so he continues in the faith mini chapter saying, God helps those who help themselves, and you reap what you sow. And it's almost impossible to fight off an enemy as vicious as OCD if you're bogged down with feelings of self-hatred. So pretty strong words. He continues with saying, doing CBT, self-treatment, can be viewed as a form of spiritual self-purification. This speaks to me. A lot of other books are very scientific only, so I thought this was really interesting. And then this next piece, to anyone who plays sports or goes to the gym and lifts weights, talks about how it's not how you feel, but what you do that counts. And if you concentrate your effort and your will, and you use it to do the right thing, you letting go of excessive concern with feelings and comfort level, that's the thing, is changing your behavior. And then, so anyway, that was kind of me reading my highlights from that part. And then he goes into different people with their kind of before and after treatment. Oh, cool. I got a question here. Checking. If I feel the same about thoughts about harm and POCD is my big compulsion. Yeah, I hear you. I work in an elementary school. It's they're hard. That's why I really like the spiritual part of this week's reading in the Brain Lock Challenge for our support group. It talks about how with OCD, it's not your spirit that's like evil or tainted. It's we've got like an overfiring frontal cortex, which I guess is here in the brain. And he talks about doing therapy the correct way will make it so that the thoughts aren't as crazy, aren't as intense. So I totally get it. I would say harm, POCD, harm, violence to yourself, violence to others, they're all kind of in the same umbrella. And anyway, it's hopeful in this chapter because he talks about like, and I'm just about to get to it. It's like all these examples of people who've gotten better. And I mean, I lost a lot of, in my life to OCD, and to be able to be where I'm at now, live streaming about it is a feat. But I didn't like some of the people in these examples for the reading is blows my mind how much they lost. He talks about Kyle, who struggled with years with violent thoughts about shooting himself or jumping out a window. And, we're talking years. Some of my favorites are, where is she? Anna was one of my favorites. She had like ROCD, where she was just constantly annoying her boyfriend. Now they're married, but she would just constantly ask, like, what did he eat? Who did he date 20 years ago? And then she got the intrusive thought about like, is he gay? And then all of a sudden she's just asking him every 20 minutes if he's gay, if he still likes her and stuff like that. I thought if you're going to do the reading with us, that Anna was a really funny case study care example. And then the one that kind of blew my mind was, I think it was Jill. She had like daughters and she left them behind and traveled like the United States because entire states were becoming contaminated. And then she'd call her daughters to check in on them. And then her daughters were lying to her because if they told her the truth, then she would think they're contaminated and then they have to go through rituals. It's really, really interesting reading. Made me feel a bit better knowing, look at all these other people who struggle like this too. And then she said once she was more treated, if you give into it, it snowballs. And anyway, so that's the reading for this week with the key points to remember. I'll just read it really quickly. So this is step 2. It's called Reattribute. It means answering the questions like, why do these thoughts and urges keep bothering us? Why don't they go away? And it's because we have a medical condition called OCD, which is related to a biochemical imbalance in the brain, which malfunctions our gear shifts. So we get stuck in gear. And this is the hopeful part, changing your behavioral responses to the uncomfortable feelings and shifting them to useful, constructive behaviors will, over time, make the broken gear shift come unstuck. And the final point is, as the brain starts to shift gears properly, the uncomfortable feelings begin to fade and become easier to control. So that is my highlights for the reading for this week's support group Brain Lock Challenge. We're just reading Brain Lock. When I used to run my previous support group, people were shocked I hadn't read this book. And then because I have OCD, I have reading OCD. So this was a way for me, as well as the other people in the support group who were doing this, to read from page 1 to the last page, like in a straight line, because I don't do that. I skip around. Like, the last thing I want to do is read from page 1 to the end and then avoid like rereading, So anyway, that support group starts in 15 minutes. If you're interested, it's in the Facebook group. All the details are in the bio. Thanks a lot for checking in. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you soon.